Chapter 6. South Asians and North Africans. 1. Intelligence of indigenous South Asians and North Africans. 2. South Asians and North Africans in Britain and Australia. 3. South Asians and North Africans in continental Europe. 4. Indians in Africa, Fiji, Malaysia, and Mauritius. 5. High school and university students. 6. Brain size. 7. Heritability of intelligence in South Asians and North Africans. 8. Genetic and environmental determinants of the intelligence of South Asians and North Africans. 9. Intelligence in Israel. JE. South Asians and North Africans are the indigenous peoples of Southern Asia from Bangladesh in the east through India, Pakistan, Iraq, Iran, the Gulf states, the Near East, and Turkey, and of North Africa, north of the Sahara Desert. They are closely related to the Europeans, and in some of the taxonomies of classical anthropology, such as that of Kuhn, Garn, and Birdsell, the two peoples have been regarded as a single race designated the Caucasoids. But Cavalli, Sforza, Minozzi, and Piazza, in their genetic analysis of human differences, have shown that the South Asians and North Africans form a distinctive genetic cluster that differentiates them from the Europeans. They are therefore treated here as a separate race. 1. Intelligence of indigenous South Asians and North Africans. Studies of the intelligence of indigenous South Asians and North Africans are summarized in Table 6.1. The figures are only for general intelligence, because there are virtually no data for verbal or visualization abilities. Rows 1 through 13 give 12 results for various locations in India, lying in the range between 78 and 88, and with a median of 82. Rows 14 through 17 give IQs of 84, 83, 89, and 80 for 4 samples of schoolchildren in Iran, all taken from the city of Shiraz. Rows 18 and 19 give IQs of 87 for children and adults in Iraq. Row 20 gives an IQ of 86 for Arabs in Israel obtained in the standardization sample of the WISC-R as compared with Jews. Row 21 gives an IQ of 84 for Jordan calculated from the standardization sample of the KABC. Row 22 gives an IQ of 86 for Kuwait obtained from a standardization of the progressive matrices on school children. Row 23 gives an IQ of 82 for school children in various locations in Lebanon. Row 24 gives an IQ of 78% for Nepal obtained from children in 34 schools in towns, villages, and the jungle area. Row 25 gives an IQ of 84 for adolescents at schools in Pakistan in the region of Islamabad. The comparison group is 707 European children in Canada reported in the same study. Row 26 gives an IQ of 84 for children in Pakistan, obtained from 9 schools around Karachi representing poor and affluent areas. Row 27 gives an IQ of 78 for school children in Qatar. Row 28 gives an IQ of 79 for young children attending a village school in Sri Lanka. Row 29 gives an IQ of 83 for young children in first grade in schools in Syria compared with a sample of 200 of the same age in Germany. Rows 30 through 32 give IQs of 84, 90, and 96 for 3 samples of school students in Turkey. Row 33 gives an IQ of 85 for Yemen derived from a standardization of the CPM on a sample of 6 to 11-year-olds. Rows 34 through 38 give IQs for North African samples. Row 34 gives an IQ of 84, obtained from a mixed sample of North Africans from Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. Rows 35, 36, and 37 give IQs of 77, 81, and 83 for school children in Egypt. The 38 IQs of the South Asians and North Africans show reasonable consistency. With the exception of Turkey, all the IQs lie in the range between 77 and 89. The median IQ of the entire set of results is 84 and is considered the best estimate for the IQ of South Asians and North Africans. The median IQ of 90 derived from the 3 studies for Turkey is higher than that in the remainder of South Asia and North Africa. The most likely explanation for this is that Turkey has straddled Europe and Asia for many centuries, and the geographical proximity of Turkey and Southeast Europe will have brought about a mixing of Turkish and European genes to produce a European South Asian cline or genetically hybrid mixed population, with the result that contemporary Turks and Greeks are genetically quite similar, as shown by Cavalli, Sforza, Minozzi, and Piazza, and noted in Chapter 3. Table 6.1. IQs of South Asians and North Africans. 2. South Asians and North Africans in Britain and Australia. IQs of South Asians in Europe and Australia are given in Table 6.2. Row 1 gives an IQ of 87 for Indian children in London, collected in the mid-1960s by the Inner London Education Authority and calculated by Vernon. Row 2 gives an IQ of 93 for a sample of Pakistani children in London. Row 3 gives an IQ of 91 for Indian children at a comprehensive school in Essex in a study in which Afro-Caribbean children at the same school obtained an IQ of 85. Rows 4 and 5 give IQs of 94 and 89 for Indian and Pakistani children in a town in the British Midlands. Afro-Caribbean children at the same schools obtained an IQ of 86, confirming the result in Row 3, finding higher IQs of South Asians than of Africans. Rows 6 and 7 give IQs of 83 and 97 for Indians nationwide, and rows 8 and 9 give IQs of 93 and 96% of Pakistani children nationwide. Rows 10 through 12 give results from a study in which Pakistani, Indian, and Bangladeshi children obtained IQs of 93, 92, and 92, and therefore there were no IQ differences between these three groups from the Indian subcontinent. These IQs are relative to 100 for white children attending the same schools, and are likely to be somewhat inflated because 7% of white children, mainly middle class with higher IQs, attend private schools, and white middle-class parents who send their children to state schools typically tend to avoid sending them to schools with large numbers of immigrants. The effect of this will have been that the IQs of the South Asians will be inflated relative to national norms. There are no national norms for the tests used, so the amount by which the IQs are. Table 6.2. IQs of South Asians in Britain and Australia. Inflated cannot be determined but is probably around 5 IQ points. Row 13 gives an IQ of 89 for South Asian immigrants in Australia. The range of IQs of South Asian Europeans in Britain is quite large, from 83 to 97. One reason for this considerable range is that the 1Q is increased with length of residence in Britain. This is shown in 2 of the studies. First, rows 6 and 7 give non-verbal reasoning IQs of 83 for Indian children resident for fewer than 4 years in Britain, and 97 for those resident in Britain for 4 or more years, indicating a gain of 14 IQ points arising from residence in Britain. It is interesting to note that the IQ of 83% of Indian children resident for fewer than 4 years in Britain is almost the same as the IQ of 82 for Indians in India, given in Table 6.1. Second, rows 8 and 9 give non-verbal reasoning IQs of 93 for Pakistani children resident for fewer than 4 years in Britain, and 96 for Pakistani children resident for 4 or more years in Britain, indicating a gain of 3 IQ points with longer residence in Britain. The median IQ of the studies of South Asians in Britain is 89, and the IQ of South Asian immigrants in Australia, given in the last row, is the same. This is a little higher than the IQ of 84% of indigenous South Asians, consistent with the results showing that IQs improve with length of residence in Britain and Australia. These IQ gains may be due to a variety of factors. Recent immigrants will have had difficulty in speaking and understanding English, and this will have impaired their performance even on nonverbal tests, because of difficulty in understanding the instructions given in English. In addition, those who had been born in Britain may have benefited from better nutrition and education than comparable children received in their own countries. 3. South Asians and North Africans in continental Europe. IQs of South Asians and North Africans in continental Europe are given in Table 6.3. Row 1 gives an IQ of 86 for Turkish immigrants in Germany. Rows 2 through 17 give results of 16 studies of the IQs obtained by South Asians and North Africans immigrants in the Netherlands, A useful review of a number of these studies has been given by Tenesian Huis and van der Flyer. Row 2 gives an IQ of 78 for a sample of the children of first-generation immigrants from Turkey, and Row 3 an IQ of 79 for a sample of the children of second-generation immigrants from Turkey. Both IQs are low and indicate no significant improvement in the intelligence of second-generation immigrants. Row 4 gives an IQ of 75 for a sample of children of first-generation immigrants from Morocco, and Row 5 an IQ of 79 for a sample of children of second-generation immigrants from Morocco. Again, both IQs are low, but there appears to be some improvement in the intelligence of second-generation immigrants, as has been found in the studies of immigrants in Britain. Row 6 gives an IQ of 83 for children of immigrants from Morocco and Turkey. Rows 7 and 8 give IQs of 85 and 84 for further samples of Moroccan and Turkish immigrant children. Row 9 gives an IQ of 88 for a sample of Indians, 6 IQ points higher than the median IQ of 82 in India. Row 10 gives an IQ of 93 for Moroccan and Turkish children, the average of 92% obtained on the OTIS and 94 on the CETO, both of which are largely verbal tests. Row 11 gives an IQ of 84 for Turkish and Moroccan children obtained on the standardization sample of the Snijers-Uman nonverbal test. IQs of those born in the Netherlands were the same those who had only been in the country from 1 to 6 years. Rows 12 and 13 give IQs of 85 and 84 for samples of Moroccan and Turkish children. Rows 14 and 15 give IQs of 84 and 88 for Moroccan and Turkish adults on the General Ability Test battery. This is a Dutch test with 8 subtests measuring vocabulary, arithmetical ability, perceptual speed, etc. The Turkish and Moroccan immigrants performed poorly on vocabulary because they had not learned Dutch well, and this test has therefore been omitted in the calculation of the IQs. The figures for G are the average of the remaining 7 subtests. Row 16 gives an IQ of 92 for Muslims in the Netherlands from Turkey and Morocco, compared with approximately 69,000 Dutch Europeans. This figure is obtained from a test of arithmetic entered as verbal IQ. The mean vocabulary IQ of this sample was 85%, but this is not entered because most of these children did not speak Dutch as their first language. Row 17 gives an IQ of 94 for second-generation immigrant children, of whom 72% were from Turkey and Morocco, and 10% from Suriname and the Netherlands Antilles. Their verbal IQ was 80%, but this has been omitted on the grounds that most of them did not speak Dutch as their first language. The results of the studies from the Netherlands are closely similar to those from Britain. The median IQ of the first 8 studies of first-generation immigrants is 84, the same as that of indigenous South Asians and North Africans. Row 18 gives an IQ of 83 for Gypsies in Slovakia. The result is given here because Gypsies, or Roma as they are coming to be called, are of South Asian stock who migrated from northwest India between the 9th and 14th centuries. This has been shown by linguistic analysis of their Romani language, which has been found to have an Indian origin, and by genetic analysis. They have remained largely isolated from Europeans, and their IQ is typical of South Asians. 4. Indians in Africa, Fiji, Malaysia, and Mauritius. There are Indian populations in several countries in Africa. In South Africa, they number about 1 million, of whom approximately 84% are in Natal, and 14% are in the Transvaal. There are also Indians in Kenya and Tanzania, whose ancestors were brought in by the British and Germans under colonial rule to do work of various kinds, including building railways. Studies of the IQs of Indians in Africa are summarized in Table 6.4. Row 1 gives an IQ of 77 for the first study of the IQ of Indians in South Africa, compared with 65 for Africans. Row 2 gives an IQ of 88 for Indian computer programming students, compared with an IQ of 100 for a comparable sample of 243 whites. Row 3 gives an IQ of 86 calculated from the standardization samples of the Junior South African Individual Scales. This test resembles the Wechsler. The norms for Indians have been calculated in relation to the South African White Standardization Sample. The test contains a scale for numerical ability, on which the Indians obtained an IQ of 86, which contributes to the overall IQ. Row 4 gives an IQ of 91 in relation to British 1,979 norms. White South Africans obtained an IQ of 98, hence Indians scored 7 IQ points below South African whites. Row 5 gives an IQ of 83 in relation to South African whites on the South African Junior Aptitude Test. This test also has 2 memory subtests on which the Indians obtained an IQ of 89. In the same study, Africans in South Africa obtained an IQ of 63, showing again that Indians in South Africa obtain much higher IQs than Africans. The median IQ of Indians in South Africa derived from the 5 studies is 86%. This is a little higher than the median IQ of 82% of Indians in India, and a little lower than the IQ of approximately 89% of Indians born in Britain. Possibly a reason for these differences is that standards of living are lowest in India, higher in South Africa, and highest in Britain, and these have had some effect on intelligence levels. There may also have been differences in the intelligence of the migrants from whom the Indians in South Africa and Britain are descended. The ancestors of the Indians in South Africa were largely recruited to work in the sugar and tobacco plantations and may not have had such high IQs as those who migrated to Britain in the second half of the 20th century. Row 6 gives an IQ of 91 for Indians in Tanzania. The sample consisted of secondary school students who had to pass an entrance examination for entry to their schools, and the IQ is therefore somewhat inflated. The IC of this sample is probably about 8 IQ, points higher than that of the general population of Indians in Tanzania, which can therefore be estimated at approximately 83. Closely similar to the IQ of 82% of Indians in India, given in Table 6.1. In the same study, Africans at the same selective schools obtained an IQ of 78%. This difference confirms a number of studies in South Africa and Britain showing that when Indians and Africans are in the same environment, Indians obtain substantially higher IQs than Africans. Row 7 gives an IQ of 82 for Indians in Fiji, in which there are approximately the same number of Indians and indigenous Fijians. The Fijians obtained a mean IQ of 84 in the same study. Row 8 gives an IQ of 88 for Indians in Malaysia, obtained from a standardization of Raven's standard progressive matrices. Row 9 gives an IQ of 89 for 11-year-olds in Mauritius, described as a community sample, of which 69% were Indians and the remainder Creoles of mixed European and sub-Saharan African descent, whose IQ is 2.5 points lower than that of the Indians. The studies summarized in Table 6.4 lie in the range between 77 and 91 and have a median IQ of 88, a little higher than that in India and about the same as that of Indians. In Europe, this is probably because Indians outside India generally enjoy higher living standards and possibly because those who have emigrated from India have had above-average intelligence. 5. High school and university students. Studies of the intelligence of South Asian and North African students in high school, colleges, and universities are summarized in Table 6.5. It would be expected that these would be somewhat higher than the intelligence of general population samples, and it will be seen that this is the case. Row 1 gives an IQ of 85 for students at the University of Alexandria, and is only fractionally higher than the IQ of 83 on the same test of a general population sample, given in Table 6.1. Row 2 gives an early study of 1926, in which second-year students at the University of Calcutta obtained an IQ of 95. The test used was the Stanford, on which American students at the University of Stanford obtained a mean IQ of 113. Row 3 gives an IQ of 93 for 14-year-old students at St. Xavier's School in Delhi, described as coming from upper-class families. Rows 4 and 5 give IQs of 90 and 88 for students at the Punjab University. Row 6 gives an IQ of 88 for women students at various colleges in the Indian city of Amritsar. Row 7 gives an IQ of 90 for university students in engineering, economics, and the liberal arts in Tehran. Row 8 gives an IQ of 92 for high school students in Baghdad, described by the author of the study as a highly selected group, since education is not compulsory at the high school level, and students who do reach this level have to pass rigid examinations. Rows 9 and 10 give IQs of 98 and 102 for engineering students at the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa, In this study, European students in the same faculty obtained IQs of 106 and 113, and Black African students IQs of 93 and 99. Row 11 gives an IQ of 106 for a further sample of engineering students at the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa. In this study, European students in the same faculty obtained an IQ of 116, and Black African students an IQ of 101. Thus, in these three studies of students, the IQs of the Indians fall midway between those of whites and blacks, as they do in general population samples. Also, in these studies, the IQs of the Indians are somewhat higher than those in South Asia and North Africa. This is probably attributable to the IQs of Indians in South Africa being higher, and because the engineering department of the University of the Witwatersrand takes relatively talented students. Rows 12 and 13 give IQs of 92 and 101 for university students in Turkey. Table 6.5. IQs of South Asian and North African high school and university students. Row 12 gives an IQ of 92 for 15 women and 24 men students of dentistry at Ataturk University in the city of Erzurum. Row 13 gives an IQ of 101 for medical students at the same university. The median of the studies is an IQ of 92, 8 points higher than that of general population samples of South Asians and North Africans. The interest of these studies is that they show that South Asian and North African university students with extensive education and from upper and middle class families have lower IQs than average Europeans. This indicates that lack of education is unlikely to be a major factor responsible for the low IQs of general population samples. The IQs of South Asian and North African students are also lower than the median of 105 for European college students. Thus, the 15 IQ point difference between Europeans and South Asians and North Africans in general population samples is closely similar to the 14 IQ point difference between college students. 6. Brain size of South Bay Asians. 4 sets of data on the brain size of South Asians compared with that of Europeans are shown in Table 6.6. Row 1 gives data assembled by Smith and Beals from approximately 20,000 crania collected worldwide. Table 6.6. Brain size of Europeans and South Asians, and shows a European advantage of 84 CCS. Row 2 gives data assembled from various sources by Groves, who contends that there are no racial differences in brain size, but which nevertheless show a European advantage of 63 CCS. Row 3 gives average brain size of 6 samples of Europeans from North America and Europe, and 2 samples from India, from data compiled by Jurgens et al., and analyzed by Rushton, showing a European advantage of 126 CCS. Row 4 gives data compiled by the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration for the average of 19 European male military samples and for a male Iranian military sample, showing a European advantage of 114 CCS. The figures in the 4 data sets all show greater brain size of Europeans and are reasonably consistent considering that they were compiled using different methods. The Smith and Beals data are derived from measurements of the volume of skulls. The Groves data come from various sources, while the data sets in rows 3 and 4 have been calculated from external measurements of the heads of living individuals. The average of the 4 data sets is a European Caucasoid advantage of 97 cc. 7. Heritability of intelligence in South Asians. There have been 2 studies of the heritability of intelligence in India, both of which have used the method of comparing the IQs of identical and non-identical twins. Pal, Sham, and Singh have reported a study of 30 MEM-Z and 30 same-sex DZ adult twins and calculated the heritability at 0.81. If this is corrected for attenuation, assuming a test reliability of 0.9, the heritability becomes 0.90. In a second study, Nathawat and Puri obtained a heritability of 0.90, which corrected for attenuation, assuming a test reliability of 0.9 becomes 1. Thus, the heritability of intelligence in India is marginally higher than that of 0.8% in Europeans. 8%. Genetic and environmental determinants of TBE intelligence of South B Asians and North TB Africans. We saw in Table 6.1 that the median IQ of the studies of indigenous South Asians and North Africans is 84. This IQ is depressed environmentally because of the low standard of living of these peoples. A report on malnutrition in South Asia and North Africa in the early 1990s, published by UNICEF, estimated prevalence rates of stunting of 24% of children in the Middle East and North Africa and 60% of children in South Asia, indicating the effect of suboptimal nutrition. There is little doubt that this has an adverse effect on intelligence. Nevertheless, it seems likely that genetic factors are also involved. First, the very high heritabilities of intelligence in both South Asians and Europeans show that genetic factors are largely responsible for differences in intelligence within the two populations, and this makes it likely that these contribute to the differences between the two populations. Second, it has been shown that South Asians and North Africans living in the affluent European environments of Britain, Australia, and the Netherlands have median IQs of 89, 89, and 94. All of these are higher than the average IQ of 84 of those in their indigenous homelands and poorer environments. These figures show that when South Asians and North Africans are reared in European environments, their IQs increase, but they do not increase to the same level as those of Europeans. This suggests the presence of genetic factors. Third, the IQ of Indians in South Africa is 86%. This is higher than the IQ of 82 in India and is attributable to the better living standards, but it is substantially below the IQ of Europeans. The Indians were brought to Natal in the 1850s to work on the sugar plantations. They have had some 4 to 6 generations to adapt to life in South Africa, live in the same country and in approximately the same environment as Europeans. Yet a large IQ difference remains and suggests a genetic difference between the two populations. Fourth, the average brain size of South Asians is about 8% smaller than that of Europeans, and may be partly due to suboptimal nutrition, but is likely also to have some genetic basis and contribute to the intelligence difference. 9. Intelligence in Israel. Intelligence in Israel is higher than in the other countries of South Asia and North Africa. 8 studies of intelligence in Israel are summarized in Table 6.7. The IQs lie in the range of 89 to 97 with a median of 95. This is substantially higher than the median of 84 for the remainder of South Asia, showing that Jews have higher IQs than other South Asians. In Israel, approximately 20% of the population are Arabs, whose IQ of 86 is virtually the same as that of other South Asians in the Near East. 40% of the population are European Jews, and 40% are Oriental Jews from Asia and North Africa. 3 studies carried out in Israel have found that the Ashkenazim have a mean IQ approximately 12 IQ. Table 6.7. Intelligence in Israel. Points higher than the Oriental Jews. The IQ of 95 for Israel is the weighted mean of the IQs of 103 of the Ashkenazim Jews, 91% of the Oriental Jews, and 86% of the Arabs. The lower IQ of Arabs in Israel compared with Jews is confirmed by Zeidner, who has reported that Arab applicants for admission to university obtain an IQ 15 IQ points lower than that of Jewish applicants. There are 2 questions concerning the Jewish IQ that require explanation. The first is why the Ashkenazim Jews in Israel have an IQ of 103. This is not particularly surprising because there is considerable evidence that Ashkenazim Jews in the United States and Britain have substantially higher IQs than Gentiles. In the United States, a study published in the 1920s reported that Jewish 10-year-olds had an IQ 13 points higher on the Stanford-Binet test than European Gentiles. In the 1940s, Nardi reported an IQ of 110 on the Stanford-Binet test for Jewish 12-year-olds, and in the 1950s, Levinson found an IQ of 109 for Jewish 12-year-olds, also on the Stanford-Binet test. Herrnstein and Murray reported an IQ of 112.6 for Jewish adolescents in their study of the National Longitudinal Study of Youth, and the latest study has found an IQ of 107.5 in a nationally representative sample of adults. Similarly, high IQs for Jewish children have been reported in Britain. In the 1920s, Davies and Hughes found that Jewish 8 to 14-year-olds in London had an IQ of 110, compared with 100 for British children. In the 1960s, Jewish 10-year-olds in Glasgow had an IQ of 117.8, compared with Scottish children in the same city. However, this figure for the Jewish IQ is too high for a comparison with British children as a whole, because the IQ of children in Glasgow is 93.7% in relation to 100 for the national average. To compare the mean IQ of Jewish children in Glasgow with that of British non-Jewish whites, we have therefore to subtract 6.3 IQ points from their score, giving them a mean IQ of 111.5. Thus, the IQs of Jews in the United States and Britain average between around 107 to 115, and are therefore higher than the 103 estimated for Ashkenazim Jews in Israel. Some possible explanations for this are that few American and British Jews have emigrated to Israel. Most of the Ashkenazim Jews in the United States and Britain fled persecution in Russia and Eastern Europe between 1880 and 1914, and in Germany between 1933 and 1939. It seems likely that these would have been the more intelligent who foresaw the dangers of staying and were able to organize immigration. Those who remained in Russia and Eastern Europe would likely have been a little less intelligent. These are the ones who emigrated to Israel after World War II to escape persecution and poverty, and whose IQs are a little lower than those of Ashkenazim Jews in the United States and Britain. A further factor is that many of these supposedly European Jews are not Jews at all, but pretended to be Jews in order to get permission to leave the Soviet Union. A second problem concerning the intelligence of Jews is that all Jews were originally from the same stock. So why is the intelligence of Ashkenazim Jews approximately 12 IQ points higher than that of Oriental Jews? There are probably two answers to this question. The first is that despite strict Jewish prohibitions on exogamy, there has always been some intermarriage and intermating between Jews and non-Jews living in the same localities. Even a small amount of exogamy over many generations is sufficient to introduce significant proportions of non-Jewish genes into the Jewish gene pool. The effects of this are visible in European Jews, a number of whom have fair hair and blue eyes. The result of this will have been that Ashkenazim Jews in Europe will have absorbed a significant proportion of the genes for higher intelligence possessed by the Europeans, while the Oriental Jews in the Near East and North Africa will have absorbed a significant proportion of the genes for lower intelligence from the South Asians and North Africans. The second factor that has probably operated to increase the intelligence of Ashkenazim Jews in Europe and the United States as compared with Oriental Jews is that the Ashkenazim Jews have been more subject to persecution. Jews were less persecuted over the course of many centuries in Southwest Asia and North Africa. Oriental Jews experienced some persecution sufficient to raise their IQ of 91, as compared with 84% among other South Asians and North Africans, but not so much as that experienced by Ashkenazim Jews in Europe. The 12 IQ point difference between Ashkenazim Jews and Oriental Jews in Israel is almost certainly to some degree a genetic difference. Genetic analysis by Hammer, Red, and Wood has shown that all Jews have some genetic affinity arising from their common original stock in the Near East, but that European and Oriental Jews form two genetic families, the European Jews with some genetic affinity with Gentile Europeans and the Oriental Jews with some genetic affinity with Southwest Asians and North Africans.